It had been 10 hours since we got separated from the trail. The sun was setting, we were cold, we were hungry, we were running on empty at this point. It was then I slipped through a crevasse, broke my leg. My partner tried carrying me as far as he could, but we were weak. I told him to just go on. He said he'd be back as soon as he could with help. He'd find the trail. It was then that I collapsed. I was cold. I thought this was the end. But then suddenly, I was lifted. I thought my partner had come back for me, or a rescue party or something, but I didn't recognize this individual. I couldn't see his face. And he guided me back to the trail. My partner described something very similar. He said he was wandering aimlessly when all of a sudden he just knew the right way to go, as if he was being led. And then the snow cleared for a moment and he realized he was following someone. And we both made it back safe.
Hello everybody and welcome back to Paranorms. While this event might seem like an over-dramatized account of a survival story, it's actually based on several accounts of a phenomena simply referred to as the third man factor. This will be another venture of ours into the world of the bizarre and unexplained, so let's take a look at what we know. It can be a voice, it can be a feeling or a sense of presence, and some have even reported objective visual apparitions. Regardless, they all refer to the third man factor, also known to some as third man syndrome. During times of extreme stress and trauma, such as fighting for one's own survival, be it against the elements or disasters in general, people have reported a guiding figure or helping hand which seemingly appears out of nowhere and leads them to safety, and just as quickly as they appear, they just vanish. Now, these stories would be intriguing enough, but what makes them more interesting is the fact that it's not just one person who sees this guiding figure, but oftentimes they can be seen or felt by others, and usually without any prompts or cues from anyone else in the party. The first documented account we have of this phenomena brings us back to 1915 and the story of Ernest Shackleton, a famed British polar explorer, and the loss of his ship Endurance. This was during the heyday of Antarctic exploration, and Shackleton had conceived a plan to cross the Antarctic continent from coast to coast, which would be a first at the time, in what would be known as the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition. However, his ship became trapped and eventually sank by the unforgiving ice flows of the freezing waters, and him and 28 crew members had become stranded atop the frozen sea. Eventually, they were able to reach Elephant Island, but due to its harsh and uninhabitable land, they needed to keep moving. Shackleton and 5 able-bodied men journeyed out aboard a small boat toward the nearest island, South Georgia, some 800 miles away. Upon reaching its frozen shores, they could not risk another open-water venture and were forced to trek the 32 miles across icy cliffs and mountains to reach its northern coast, where they would surely find help. 2 men stayed behind, and the journey was up to Shackleton, sailor John Worsley, and Tom Crean. They barely made it alive and were finally rescued once their journey concluded. While this would be a remarkable story on its own, our interest here lies in a quote from Shackleton's writings on the topic. He said, "During that long and racking march of 36 hours over the unnamed mountains and glaciers of South Georgia, it seemed to me often that we were 4, not 3. This would be the first account ever documented of this phenomena, and supposedly the feeling was corroborated by his team as being mutual." This is not the only story of these interesting accounts, but many are quick to say that they could easily be all chalked up to adrenaline or some form of hallucination brought on by extreme stress. Others have simply said it's just an overall coping mechanism for being faced with the very real possibility of your own death. Some have even suggested things further. In 2006, there was an interesting study that found by stimulating the left temporoparietal junction of the brain, they created a sensation in subjects that gave them the illusion that someone was in the room with them. Many feel that somehow the brain, being overworked during these times of trauma, may be experiencing something similar, but ultimately it still doesn't explain how these figures appear and lead people to safety, or somehow have inherent knowledge of their surroundings. But who knows? Maybe it's something instinctual. I do know this though, next time we'll be discussing the flip side of this same coin, something much, much darker. So stay tuned, and I hope to see you next time.